Welcome back. Industry is responsible for about a quarter of global CO2 emissions. The cement, steel, ammonia, and other chemical industry players are really due for a sustainability overhaul. But of course, that is easier said than done. So our next panel is going to focus in on the carbon footprint of the industry and see what can be done. And to explore this topic together with our invited experts and to lead the discussion, we've invited Dr. Till Stenzel, venture partner at Set Ventures. So I'm passing the microphone over to you, Till.
Thank you very much. And welcome everyone to the panel. Hi. Yeah, so this is a virtual panel here. Sorry we can't make it to the physical location, but very happy to have two very distinguished guests here on our panel for this discussion of the topic, which I must say I was a little bit surprised when I read the title at first. So we're talking about the disassembly in process, the carbon footprint of industry. And I must admit, when I first read the title, I had to look up the word disassembly. I'm not an English native speaker. And I was a bit surprised. Disassembly, this means tear down, cut back. These were the kind of words that I saw are associated with it. And I was really wondering, is it really that? Is it really that when we talk about carbon footprinting in the industry? And I think that's part of what we want to explore in this panel here. Because from my perspective, really, carbon footprinting should be the opposite, really. It should be about installing something, erecting something new, setting up something new and building something. And we've seen, I think, some good examples now of how this can be done. And of course, ultimately in the industry, it's as much not just about cost, but also about opportunities. Of course, skeptics will always talk about the processes, the costs that it will take to build up these new systems and measure all these data points. But really, it opens up a new world if you take it seriously and proactively. And we've seen many examples now where really this allows you to build new tools, new products, and new whole business models based on the opportunities this provides. Because let's face it, ultimately, it's a lot about transparency in the first place, about being much more open and honest about your own products and how they are created. And that can, of course, unlock new opportunities, especially where customers are willing to buy and willing to pay for specific products and services here. We have, I think, two very distinguished guests here on the panel who are very glad to share this forum. We have, on the one hand, Jennifer. Jennifer Layke is the Global Director of the Energy Program at the world-renowned World Resources Institute. So thank you very much for joining. And we also have Fabian with us. Fabian is the Investment Director for the DACH region in InnoEnergy, which is really one of the largest energy-focused investors in Europe and a leading investor and accelerator in this field, so with plenty of experience to share with us here. So maybe before we jump into the topics, I give Jennifer and Fabian the chance to introduce themselves and share with us a little bit about your background and experience. Jennifer, please.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here today, and such an important topic. I too was intrigued by the framing of disassembly. But I wanted just to share with you a little bit about myself, where I'm coming from in this. I've spent the last 25 years working on at the intersection of economic development, environmental protection, and social change, social movements, how to create those and where and how we can work together to build a more just, resilient, and safe climate future for all of the world's people. WRI, those of you who know us, we're a research institution that works globally, and I lead the global energy work, which includes focusing on the just energy transition, thinking about the deployment of renewables, energy efficiency as our first and most critical investment to slow climate change, and energy access and the need for us to make sure that we're bringing everyone into a clean energy agenda. Thank you for having me.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. And over to Fabian.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, my background, I'm an entrepreneur. I founded a company after finishing my studies, and I grew up for 8 years, and it's still living, let's say. But I moved out to work 5 years in energy related consulting and auditing. And then I had the chance to work 1 year at the World Economic Forum in a project where we investigated how innovation in energy could be accelerated to meet climate goals. And this was where I got in contact with InnoEnergy and had the chance to work here as you mentioned already as investment director. And InnoEnergy is one of the largest, as you mentioned, investor in climate tech in Europe. And we have, beside, let's say, small investments in innovations in really early stage, we are also supporting industrial scale projects. Therefore, we have 3 different value chain initiatives. We started with the EBA, with the European Battery Alliance, and followed by the ECAC, what is the European Green Hydrogen Acceleration Center, what we are running together with partnering with Breakthrough Energy. And we're really are looking to bring together different players of the value chain so that industrial scale projects can fly, can happen. And first example from this initiative is, for example, not directly an outcome, but supported by this initiative is H2 Green Steel, and are others that we are right now heavily working on. The third thing is the ESI, which is the European Solar Initiative that we are promoting together with Solar Power Europe, and the same idea, always to bring industrial scale project to profitable business cases to make an impact in decarbonization.
Great. Thanks, Fabian. Just a few words about myself as well. I don't think I have to introduce SET Ventures as such, since we just had Julia Patberg, our distinguished colleague, on the startup pitch panel. So you've learned about the venture fund there. I myself had a career over 10 years in the energy industry, especially in the renewable energy space, building up renewables projects, especially in Northern Africa, looking at really the large-scale solar opportunity there, and then later working at E.ON as well in the split at the time between E.ON and Uniper when the carve-out happened at the time. And the last 4 years I spent with Deutsche Telekom's investment arm, DTCP. So really there looking both at strategic initiatives from the corporate side. So among others, Deutsche Telekom spun out a e-mobility charging infrastructure a couple of years ago in Germany. So some sort of input there also from the investment side, from my side, and also then leading a classic strategic investment vehicle for Deutsche Telekom, where we made startup investments and really looked at the collaboration between startups and big corporates here and the potential that this creates on both sides. And maybe this is a good starting point as well to jump into some of the discussion points that we have here, because I think one thing that we can often observe is that corporates, when they look at climate change and the innovation required, they often need impulses from external sources, including startups. And here, obviously, one big topic is always technology insights, new innovation as such. So how can we make our products and processes cleaner and more efficient? But equally important probably is also the cultural change here and the mindset change that startup can bring. So Fabian, I would want to put it to you there. How can corporates work together with startups, and maybe even how can they themselves work better with more of a startup mentality? Do you have some experience or examples there from your work in that area?
Yeah, I think this is really important, as you mentioned, that the whole ecosystem will live a cultural change. But this maybe sounds a bit generic, but it is really true that startups are more innovative and corporates are really good in industrialization. So if you have a product, then corporates can bring them in a good quality and to a good price on the streets, let's say. And these two abilities need to come together to meet the timeline that is required for energy transition. And I think in this sense, it's really important that they are working together, firstly, and secondly, that they're working together efficiently. And working together efficiently needs really, let's say, a cultural change in the mind of the one and the other. So they need to really give the credit to the other that they might have a bit other approach, a bit other thinking, and then these projects can really fly. And what you second mentioned, this cultural change in the corporate world, I think this is also crucial. So that the corporates really also not only adapt or looking for innovation that is coming from the startup scene, but also these let's say approach, being agile, being looking to Tesla, what they achieved in a few years. But as an example, we have H2 Green Steel right now in Sweden. This is a startup, and a startup that wants to produce green steel on a green field. Let's say something. This is not the typical startup approach, but this can work if you start and bring together the whole value chain. So not only planning to do something that might have clients or not, but having the clients already on board, having the documented interest of off-takers, then you can start such endeavors and also engage, as we saw it in the green steel, investors for the project. And this is something that is also really important, the adoption not only for innovation, but also from the culture.
Can you give us some more insights how you managed to bring such, I wouldn't want to call them dinosaurs of the industry, but such big heavy hitter companies into such a project? How did you convince a car OEM to commit to pay a premium for green steel? How long did it take you? What did you need to do there?
This is actually not something we needed to convince car OEMs. This is what they are let's say mentioning. So it's about listening and then thinking what makes this happen. It's always, I think, really crucial to show where are the business case already flying, and this requires off-takers. And if an off-taker says, well, we are desperately looking for green steel, and in a car, for example, the steel is about 70 euros for a whole car. So this is money, and it's important, but it's not something that makes the car price, let's say, bringing it to another level. So if they have a really green product for, let's say, not 70 but 100 euro, this is something they obviously are willing to pay, willing to accept. And if you hear this, then you can say what can happen if we take this for true, and then looking what kind of business case can fly then. And yeah, let's see. It's not working already, but the idea is there.
So maybe this is a good point to bring Jennifer here into the conversation as well. Jennifer, at the WRI, you've obviously worked a lot with corporates on corporate targets towards climate action, developing the science-based targets. What have you learned from working with corporates? In bringing them into this mindset, in making them forward-thinking about not seeing this as an extra cost, but as an opportunity for their own products and ultimately the bottom line that they are targeting?
Yep. Well, I think it's a really important discussion. How does change happen? How does culture change happen within organizations? You point, I think rightly so, to external factors. That view of the corporation as needing to provide for the needs of society. And those needs from society can come in two different ways, right? From external signals. And I think that's a very important part of what needs to happen in terms of supply chain demand for new products, in terms of thinking and articulating into the market the aspirations of any consumer. That business-to-business signal is something that we've seen around renewable energy procurement. I believe we're going to start seeing it around low-carbon product standards that are going to emerge for cement and steel over time. Government procurement programs that will start to set that that signal in place. But the other thing I want to highlight on the culture topic is that we've also seen a lot of tension inside corporations around change agents from inside. And I look at some of the biggest transformations that we've seen, and I think of Ørsted, the wind company, and I look at where they were and where they went. And that was because they read the signals both externally and they had internal change agents that were willing to make the business case to their investors and to their communities that they needed to fundamentally change their business. So one of the reports that I just was looking at online the other day is from the B team, which is just announcing a new leadership playbook on climate change. And I think that could be very powerful for employees to begin to signal that not just in the view of getting entrepreneurs engaged in the next generation of innovation, but getting intrapreneurs and being sure that we actually look into our corporations for the seeds of change that will create that change, that transformation in industry. And I do want to just note that it is critical that we set targets, that we look at pathways forward, and that we report on our progress in very transparent and clear metrics. And things like the Science-Based Targets Initiative are designed to be able to do just that, not only at a single company level, but also to look at the pathways that are required at an industry sector level. And this is important because over and over again, we hear from industry players, we don't want to be disadvantaged in the marketplace, either by moving too fast or by moving too slow. And that is, of course, a concern. You need to move fast at this point in our climate crisis. We can't have a pack mentality. We have to be looking for innovation, and we have to reward innovation in our markets and through our government policies and investment patterns, like with tax policy, et cetera.
I think this is an important point here, because often, of course, there is this philosophy, all we need is a price for carbon and the rest will follow. But is this really the case? How do you view this debate? Is it enough to set a price and then sit back and let industry do it? Do you need these sort of targeted, especially in the sort of new markets that are opening up, new policies required to really bring almost new markets to fruition in the first place before you can then start to have a more laissez-faire type of policy regulation?
Well, I think that there has to be a bit of all of these types of policy incentives. I think there needs to be very clear product standards. I think there need to be tax treatment that help bring forward investment and make it financially attractive to make changes within the corporate infrastructure and manufacturing processes. And I think a price on carbon is an essential signal. We have to absorb the externalities caused by our economic activity, and a price on carbon is one mechanism for doing that, and I think a very effective one. But clearly there are complementary policies and sectoral policies that are required. A price on carbon will not create the type of system change that we need out of our construction industry, for example. It's simply too diffuse a signal to get to zero carbon buildings, which is so important right now. And when we look at the concerns around energy crisis and natural gas or coal phase out, protecting consumers, creating an enabling environment for industry to change requires more than a price on carbon.
I think so too. And the carbon price is really important, but it's also a question of the timeline, right? So the carbon price certainly would bring a lot of things in the right direction, but as time is really running, we need also additional regulation that is, from my point of view, simple. It's not simply at the end, but the case is that we need in certain technologies, business cases that are working, that earn the money. As for example, storage. Everyone knows that we need storage for the future grids, but the business cases are simply not working as of now. And this is something that can be tackled now, not tomorrow. And this is, I think, a good example how good regulation could work.
I think this also from a venture investment perspective is something that I've seen again and again, that often technology is already further ahead compared to regulation. And I think your point about storage is a good one. I think when you look at something like the electric vehicle market, I mean, we're all expecting a big rise in electric vehicle car registration in the coming years. This is a huge battery park, when you look at it from the abstract, which will soon outweigh any commercial batteries, stationary batteries that are installed elsewhere, and which can obviously be a huge potential support and grid stabilization mechanism and renewables integration force in many markets. However, what we are lacking is clear regulation and incentives that open up this market economically. I mean, technologically, it's a no-brainer, and we are seeing startups doing exactly that. But as long as the market is not there, this will be theory, unfortunately, and not yet practice. I think that this is sometimes very frustrating.
And this is also hard to explain. We know, and the entrepreneurs know that this is part of the solution for the energy transition. And then they come into investors saying, "Hey, we have a cool solution here." And we are saying, "Yes, a cool solution in the future, definitely required, but not working right now." And this is really, as you mentioned, Jill, kind of disappointing from a certain perspective.
Yeah. If we take for a moment again the sort of industry perspective here, obviously once companies start on their carbon journey, they will probably soon see that energy will play a role either directly or indirectly, as we all know from the main reports that energy usage is here one of the main sources of carbon emissions, obviously. Do you think we will need a lot more energy experts at all levels in companies at the policy and regulation level to be able to open up all these markets and enable a lot more smaller distributed players to be a market participant in the end, both from a company and also from a policy perspective? What can we do there?
Yeah, this is a really important question. When I started working with corporations on energy procurement strategies in about the year 2001, we were working with the energy managers in about 10 Fortune 100 companies in the United States. And those energy managers didn't know how to distinguish the products associated with renewable energy and what the attributes were that they could be looking for in the market. And so building that community of experts and expertise is both within the company, but it's also the infrastructure around the company. So I've been really pleased with initiatives like RE100 and the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance, which WRI helped to launch a few years ago as an independent organization, to take forward that view of energy procurement and energy technology choices as something that was integral to the operations of a business. And that may be something that we have to build more expertise around inside, but also that companies have to know where to look outside for good advice. And I think this is in particularly a challenge for smaller companies, finding those kinds of technical experts and advisory specialists to help them understand what choices they have, right? Do I buy a heat pump to get low-grade heat? Do I look at concentrated solar technology for my processes? How do I begin to think about the technology choices? And if we make it too difficult, people are simply not going to, they're going to say, I just want to buy what I've always bought. I know how to work in natural gas. And that's part of the challenge we've got to face, is getting risk-taking understood, technology understood, but doing it in a way collectively that we're helping people manage for those changes.
And also from the regulation side, it's really crucial that there are experts in making these regulations. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that everyone is aware, for example, of the amount of electricity we need to build up a hydrogen economy. Yeah, we're talking about green hydrogen, but well, this is the one side. The other side is an incredible amount of renewable energy that we will need to do it, right? And This is something that where experts are required, and in this sense also an example is, for example, for investors. I know personally a lot of large almost every steel company in the world is intensively thinking about decarbonization of their production. So, but how to do this? Yeah, at the end, it's really important to know what is, for example, green steel. Is green steel something that is purely made with hydrogen, or is it something where you use carbon capture and storage? These are really important things that the regulator need to set to unlock investments in this arena.
Yeah. So I think it's fair to say then it's innovation in climate change is not just about technology as such, it's as much about culture and regulation here so that we can bring those technologies really in the market. And we welcome our fourth panelist here in the background, in Jennifer's home. Thanks for joining as well. Now, let's take this maybe also one step further in terms of how we then scale innovation, because I think often you have these pilot projects, you have individual projects. What is the best practice here, and then really broadening and scaling out these experiences, and how do we design the right policies around it? If we take your project that you mentioned on the H2 green steel, do you, for example, have policy experts part of the project? Do they already see and learn what kind of environment is set up there? How many startups are involved there? So just to see a little bit what is required to really broaden out such innovation when we do get the nucleus going here.
Yeah, but I think they are intensively looking to regulation and to what is our subsidy schemes and so on. I'm not that deep involved there, but I know that I think H2 for itself, it's a startup. It's a startup and it has a startup behavior. So it's a really slim and agile organization, and they do need partners, and this is what they know. So, for example, on the construction side for the installations, they need partners, and they do have partners, and they engage them already into their cap table as well. So they need to build up a greenfield factory making steel out of was nearly 100% hydrogen. It's something that need to be done by someone who has experience in this field, and there are some providers of such installations that can do that, and that's why they have them on the board. And this is, I think, a good example of how this can work. A bold startup agile approach together with incumbents that are let's say used to make such things happen in the cost in the timeline.
Makes sense.
And they already have also from the off-taker side someone in their board, which is public information. So Mercedes has invested in this company.
Jennifer, what do you see when you work with corporates on such climate innovations? What kind of groups do you try to bring together here? How do you make sure that these learnings are being spread and shared widely?
Yeah, it's really important. I think that there are a few things that are critical to our success. And the first is, I mentioned before, where and how do sectors and businesses within specific sectors view their options and their pathways. And we're part of the Energy Transition Commission. World Resources Institute supports that initiative. They've been putting out a really important series and examining what does the zero carbon trajectory look like for cement, for steel, looking at the hard-to-abate sectors, and thinking about where and how policy comes into play in creating the right incentives. So my first view of this is, the World Economic Forum, the Making Mission Possible event. These types of collaborations can really speed an education for members of an industry in terms of where and how to think about this agenda internally. The second thing, of course, is setting your own targets and then working with policymakers. We run a renewable procurement support program in Asia and in Latin America called the Clean Energy Investment Accelerator. And the purpose of this is to help overcome these transaction barriers, to build the dialogue with regulators and with policymakers in countries where the companies themselves are unable to purchase renewable energy or renewable electricity. Despite their corporate goals, they're looking for those pathways in the specific market-by-market context and where they have their business operations. And so the need for that type of aggregated signal to policymakers is an essential part of what we need to collectively be able to provide, so that it's not just one company going into a policymaker or a regulator and saying, I need a permit, how do I do this? That it's actually a view of, if we're going to scale a gigawatt of distributed renewable electricity to meet corporate demand, how are we going to get that through in a politically appropriate way with regulations and tariff structures that will enable that to succeed? And those are the kinds of collective conversations that we need to have about this transformation. Now, that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be a really important nascent supply chain of products that we encourage to be developed locally, let's say in Vietnam or in Colombia or Mexico, all of these places that we know there's a lot of global focus on. But then how do we begin that policy transformation process? And looking at the nationally determined contributions, I would say we're not as far along as we need to be. The level of specificity around the policy pathway is not yet keeping up with the pace of innovation, as we've discussed before, and the specific availability of technologies in the energy sector, that energy sector transition that every company, whether they are in the hard-to-abate space where they're looking at process energy, or whether they're looking at electricity and how to think about the existing requirements for electricity, both have to be managed, both have to be navigated with the regulators and policymakers and with investors, because in fact the investment community ultimately will help enable these things to come forward, and their perceptions of risk in these specific markets are holding back many of the solar, wind, and other types of projects because of that lack of enabling infrastructure for companies that want to be in that space in a specific country.
Let's be specific here. So we talked a bit about the hard to abate industries, and I think cement and steel now came up a couple of times. Would you say they are doing enough now? Could they be more ambitious? And if so, where?
I think that the cement and steel are the ones that are getting a lot of focus right now, right? We see a lot more of a focus on them. I mean, I look at something like the standards that are not uniform, so that's going to be a problem, right? We know that Europe has a different view of what a low-carbon cement or steel product would be than California does, than the United States does. Then many of these countries don't have a view at all of what constitutes the low-carbon product and where and how you'd be building that standards-based engagement. So it's not just that there isn't the technology, it's that actually we haven't decided on what level of performance we're asking for. And we have to do that as a part of this whole process.
Yeah, and then there are really some bold approaches required, because in for example in steel or cement as well, if you for example talking about hydrogen prices, everyone has a lot of projections how the hydrogen price can evolve and so on. But what is required are large electrolyzers at scale. And this is something that, where investors have the doubts that they are paying for the economy of scale for your competitors at the end. And so this is a chicken of egg problem somehow. And this is something that is, I think, a perfect example where the governments need to jump in to settle a bit this risk for investors and first movers.
Do you see other industries which are further down the road, or where this has worked better? Is there anyone that stands out for you?
Well, I have been impressed with light duty vehicles, right? We are seeing the auto manufacturers, the OEMs, coming forward with a set of products in very, I think, appropriately ambitious timelines for phasing out the internal combustion engine. We're working on a project to try and do the same thing with with buses, with school buses in the United States? How do we electrify the manufacturing of school buses, and how do we protect children from both the air emissions associated with diesel, as well as create an asset, a flexible asset that can be used by cities and other institutions for power backup, if you use those batteries. But the cost differential is something that has to change, and the supply chain for these kinds of vehicles has to change. So even where we see progress in the light duty vehicle space, where we have passenger cars and lots of those coming online, we aren't yet at the point where we have the whole system change happening that we need. And we don't have the grid.
And we are currently seeing how fast such a development can take place at the end if it has started once. There's this famous picture from New York in 1910 where all crowded with horses, and then 10 years later there's one horse and the rest are cars. Yeah, and I think we will see an incredible change in the offtake of EVs in the next 10 years, and this is something which is a blueprint for changes in other industries as well. Because at the end, this has also been introduced by the regulation, right? The Chinese regulation as well as the European one, and then all of a sudden we will see the last, let's say. I think the last development cycle of the combustion engine in passenger cars right now, and then we have electric.
Yeah, there are some that say it's not Elon Musk, it's the Chinese regulation that changed Volkswagen's mind about electric vehicles, right?
But then came the EU regulation on top, right? And yeah.
Exactly. So we're running almost out of time. I can see already the signal. So final question, just a short round to each of you. Where would you invest? What is your bet for the next big wave of carbon innovations? If you would have to make one investment today, which area would you go for? Jennifer, you go first.
So for me, I would be going into manufacturing processes. I'd go for heat. I would go for industrial heat, and I would look very closely at the suite of technologies, including things like heat pumps, which have been around for many years, but that we could scale quite dramatically and would benefit us with both emissions reductions and with returns on that type of technology. I think the longer term play is clearly going to be in hydrogen and some of the other floating solar applications and things like that. But right now, I'd go for low temperature heat and industrial process heat.
I think also, although it's not really popular in Germany, but I think carbon capture is something that really is part of the solution, and this is something where I would also bet on.
Very good. Well, I'm probably not allowed to tell you where our next investment from our Set Ventures fund is until it's announced, but I'm sure we'll make that announcement as soon as it happens. But thank you very much, Jennifer, Fabian, for those insights. It's been great to discuss this with you. I think we've both seen that it's not just about technology, it's about culture as well, startup mentality, even when you bring big corporates together, like in the case of H2 Green Steel. And of course, you need internal change agents in big corporates as well that can make this happen. And then regulation definitely needs to catch up and keep up with technology developments so that we can create and enable those markets that are required for climate innovation that ultimately then enable also the transition on the energy side. So thank you very much for this discussion, and I will hand back the moderation back to the SET Festival. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Till.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Till, and thank you to your panelists as well. What an incredibly insightful discussion crowned by investment tips at the end. So thanks very much for moderating that. We are now going to have another very short break before we return with our final keynote of the day, where one of our past SET finalists is going to share some insights into how to overcome certain challenges and grow your startup. So please stay tuned. We'll be right back.